Contrary to popular belief, the Boneyard is not a cemetery for aircraft. It's where aircraft come in to get a second chance, or a third chance. Aircraft come here to be preserved and treated with dignity, according to my research. Okay, now, for this particular B-52, it may have been a butcher shop experience. But consider that roughly 4,000 aircraft and parts are stored here, and they're worth a whopping $35 billion. I mean, just the technology behind this one stealth aircraft is probably worth a fortune. I think we got started on the wrong foot. Let me explain why the Boneyard is far from a junkyard for aircraft. After the end of World War II, as you can imagine, there was a huge surplus of military aircraft. Scrapping all those old airplanes would not have been a wise decision because they could be repurposed or at a minimum used for spare parts. On the other hand, building large hangars to accommodate the storage of thousands of airplanes, some of which were gigantic, would have demanded a huge investment. Luckily, the desert lands near Tucson, Arizona, provided the perfect location for an outdoor storage facility, and not just because of the dry climate of that area. There was plenty of space in the desert. The Boneyard currently covers an area of about 2,600 acres. At its peak, there were 6,080 aircraft stored at this facility. The ground here was as hard as concrete, so the heavy airplanes wouldn't sink into the desert floor, and there was no need to pave that massive area either. Of course, the low humidity and alkaline soil protected these airplanes against their biggest silent enemy, rust. However, there was one big problem. The desert gets very hot. Especially during those sunny summer days in Tucson, the temperatures could reach over 100 degrees Fahrenheit or 38 degrees Celsius. But parts of the aircraft that are enclosed, like the cockpit, could easily heat up to double that temperature. And that can destroy the flight control systems and other electronics inside over time. So something needed to be done. This is why storage, or more precisely, preservation of aircraft, is a major skill set at the Boneyard. But storage is only one of the many services that this facility provides. This is why the Boneyard is formally known as AMARC, or 309th Aerospace Maintenance and Regeneration Group. And they do some really cool things here, like taking fighter jets and turning them into drones. On average, every day, one aircraft arrives at the Boneyard and one leaves. And this is what happens to the aircraft upon arrival. The aircraft is first inspected, and the components on board are documented for inventory purposes. Naval aircraft, which used to operate from aircraft carriers, get a bit of a special treatment in the form of a thorough wash. This is done to eliminate any saltwater or other corrosive agents that may be on the aircraft. To preserve the engine, the aircraft is moved to the flush farm. At this station, any residual jet fuel is drained from the engine. Shortly after, the aircraft is refueled, not with jet fuel, but with a lightweight 1010 oil. The personnel then run the engine, which draws the oil into the fuel system and the engine components. The oil helps preserve these components while they sit in storage. The oil is then drained from the engine and returned to holding tanks for later reuse. Next, the aircraft go to the cleaning station, where they are washed and checked for any signs of corrosion. Just to make sure nothing funny happens with the ejection seat while the airplane is in storage, the actuators are removed. Deserts are dusty and hot, so parts of the aircraft are sealed using a black water-based latex-type material known as spraylat. Engine inlets and outlets are covered by an aluminized cloth material called barrier paper. Spraylat and barrier paper are used not just to protect the aircraft against dust, but also against birds that may otherwise get into the engines. To prevent the cockpit temperatures from skyrocketing and destroying the internal components while the aircraft sits under the sun for months and years, a white coating is applied on top of the black coating, which reflects much of the sunlight. With the help of this white coating, the internal temperature of the aircraft stays between 10 to 15 degrees of the outside temperature, even when it's scorching hot outside. Here's the interesting part. At some point, before aircraft can be returned to flyable status, those layers of spraylat need to be taken off. This is why before spraying the aircraft, first a wide black plastic tape, similar to electrician's tape, is used to mark the borders of the area to be sprayed. This way, the outer edges of the coating can be more easily peeled off. Once the preservation process has been completed, the aircraft is moved to a designated area for storage. With no fuel in the tank, it's not like someone could just roll in and steal these airplanes. So why do they use cables to tie down the aircraft to the ground? It's not theft that the Boneyard personnel are afraid of. It's the wind. After all, aircraft are designed to fly using lift. And even though strong winds are likely not going to fly the airplane away, they can definitely move it, which can cause damage to that aircraft or the other ones parked nearby. And this is why some larger aircraft need up to 72 tie-downs to keep them parked. One of the main contributions of AMARC is regeneration, which means taking an aircraft out of storage and returning it to flyable status. For example, turning fighter jets into drones. No, not those ones. These ones. These regeneration programs demand large hangars, like this $25 million hangar, which took 4.5 years to build. I guess someone thought that a massive hangar demands a massive pair of scissors for the opening ceremony. Thankfully, a wise guy brought his regular pair. The first full-scale drone conversions began in 1970s with the conversion of 153 F-102 Delta Daggers into their drone variant, QF-102, to be used as aerial targets. The regeneration efforts continued with the F-100 Super Sabre, F-106 Delta Dart, F-4 Phantom, and F-16 Viper. The QF-16 aerial targets take 3 to 4 months to reactivate. They can be operated manned or unmanned. AMARC's flight test pilots take the aircraft for functional testing at least a couple of times. Of course, when they're used as an aerial target, the aircraft would be unmanned. I hope. In case you're wondering why the tail is painted red, that has nothing to do with the F-16 being converted to an aerial target. It's in fact a tribute to the Tuskegee Airmen, the first African-American military aviators in the U.S. Armed Forces, who during World War II used to paint the tail of their aircraft red, not only to make them more recognizable, but also as the symbol of the Tuskegee Airmen's pride, courage, and perseverance in the face of racial discrimination that was prevalent back in those days. Aside from regeneration programs, aircraft are sometimes pulled out of storage to be sold. In 2016, 2 KC-130s, which used to be operated by the Marine Corps, were sold to the Philippines Air Force under the Foreign Military Sales Program. In the event of natural disasters like typhoons, these aircraft can provide additional airlift capabilities for the Philippines. Even though some fleets of old aircraft are still active, many of their components and spare parts are not produced anymore. The Boneyard returns between $250 million to $500 million worth of aircraft parts annually to be used in active fleets, which otherwise would have had to be grounded. But not all aircraft at the Boneyard can be used for spare parts. Type 1000 aircraft are the ones that have a high potential to return to flying status, so no parts are removed from them. They are also completely re-preserved every 4 years. Type 2000 aircraft may be reclaimed for parts, but only by the owner of the aircraft, or in the support of the System Program Office, which specifically addresses issues with aging aircraft. Type 4000 aircraft are considered excess and can be reclaimed by any military branch or government agency. When aircraft are no longer needed, they're stripped of their hazardous and radiological components. They may then be donated to museums or just be transferred to disposition agencies that coordinate their sale as scrap. That said, some aircraft have had their wings cut off due to international treaties. The Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty is a nuclear arms reduction agreement between the United States and Russia that limits the number of deployed strategic nuclear warheads, like the number of ICBMs and heavy bombers that each side can have at any given time. Basically, the US and Russia agreed that they both have way too many ways to nuke each other and decided to cut back a little bit. And for the Americans, that meant cutting 365 B-52s into pieces. Of course, since both Americans and Russians trust each other so much, the completion of the destruction was verified via satellite and in-person visits. The Boneyard is one of the 17 facilities in the United States where Russian officials can inspect in order to verify compliance with the treaty. Since the early 1960s, all surplus aircraft from the US Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, Army, Coast Guard, and other agencies like NASA have been stored at the Boneyard. AMARC even stores aircraft for some US allies, like Canada, where we are. With all that said, tell me, do you still think the Boneyard is just a junkyard for aircraft?